Have you ever felt love colder than winter itself, sitting beside someone yet feeling completely alone? This story, set in Denmark, will take you through silence, hidden pain, small sparks, and the courage to find a warmer tomorrow. Winter Heart. It was the middle of winter in Denmark. The snow covered the streets, and the wind whispered through empty alleys. Inside a small apartment, two people sat at the same table. They were close in distance, but far in heart. The silence was heavy, heavier than the sound of the storm outside. She looked at her cup of tea, not at him. He moved his spoon slowly, not saying a word. Once, this room was filled with laughter. Once, their eyes spoke more than words. But now, their hearts were colder than the Danish winter. Love was still there, but it was quiet, weak, and almost invisible. Sometimes the deepest loneliness is not being alone. It is being with someone, yet feeling unseen. Have you felt that silence, that coldness, that hidden pain? This is where our story begins. A story not only about two people, but about many of us. Because sometimes, love becomes a winter heart. And only courage can bring the warmth back. Lonely dinner. The clock struck 7 in the evening. Dinner was ready on the table. The smell of warm soup filled the room, but the air was still cold. She placed the bread carefully on a plate. He poured water into 2 glasses. They sat across from each other, but their eyes never met. The sound of spoons against the bowls was the only sound in the room. No words, no laughter, no stories of the day. Just silence, heavy and endless. Every small sound felt louder than it should. The ticking of the clock. The slow chewing. The soft sigh that escaped her lips. She wanted to ask him, "How was your day?" But the words stayed inside. He wanted to say, "I miss us." But his lips did not move. Both of them carried sentences in their hearts, but none of them were spoken. Lonely dinners are not about food. They are about the space between two people. Once, this table was alive with conversation, dreams, and gentle smiles. Now, it felt like two strangers sharing a meal. Have you ever eaten with someone you love, but felt completely alone? That emptiness at the table is deeper than hunger. It is the hunger for connection, the hunger for warmth, the hunger for love. This is the quiet tragedy of many relationships. People live together, but they stop talking. They share the same roof, but not the same heart. And little by little, love becomes weaker, like a candle fading in the wind. But sometimes, silence is not the end. It is a signal. A signal that the heart is asking for change. Silent streets. The streets of Copenhagen were quiet that night. Snow covered the ground, soft and white, like a blanket that kept every sound away. The street lamps glowed faintly, making long shadows stretch across the empty road. She walked slowly, her hands deep inside her coat pockets, her breath visible in the cold air. It was strange. The city was full of people, yet she felt alone. Couples passed by, holding hands, their laughter floating in the night. Families rushed home, children running ahead with red cheeks. But her steps felt heavier with each corner she turned. Loneliness in a crowd is the heaviest kind of loneliness. You see warmth around you, but you cannot touch it. You hear laughter, but it does not belong to you. It is like standing outside a house in winter, watching fire through the window but never feeling its heat. She thought of her dinner table again. The silence. The distance. The way love had turned cold, like the frozen lake she passed by. She asked herself quietly, is this all there is? Is this what life will be? Silent meals, silent streets, silent years? The snow crunched under her shoes. Each step felt like a small question without an answer. She wanted to scream, but the night was too still. She wanted to cry, but even her tears felt frozen. Have you ever walked through streets that looked beautiful but made your heart ache even more? Beauty without warmth is another form of pain. It reminds you of what you are missing, and yet, in that silence, there was also a small spark. The spark of awareness. The spark that maybe, just maybe, she did not want to live like this forever. Old memories. Memories are strange. They come back when you least expect them, like old songs playing in the background of your mind. As she walked through the snowy streets, her thoughts returned to the early days of love, when everything felt bright and alive. She remembered their first coffee together in a small cafe near the harbor. He had smiled at her with warmth in his eyes, and she had felt safe, almost like the world outside had disappeared. Every word seemed important, every laugh a treasure. There was also the summer trip to Aarhus. They had walked along the beach, barefoot, the sea breeze carrying their laughter into the open sky. They had dreamed aloud, talking about the future, about a home filled with music, books, and the smell of fresh bread. Those days were not perfect, but they were real. They were alive. The memory of his hand reaching for hers made her chest ache now. The distance between them today felt impossible to cross, like a bridge that had collapsed in silence. Love, she thought, is not killed by storms. It is killed by silence. By routine. By the slow frost that builds when two people stop looking at each other with wonder. And that frost was now thick around her heart. She asked herself, how did we move from laughter to silence? From warmth to cold? Her memories were sweet, but they hurt like glass in her chest. The past was a reminder of what had been lost. Still, memories are not only pain. They are also a mirror, showing what the heart still longs for. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, they carried a quiet message. If love once lived here, maybe it can live again. The breaking point. There comes a moment when silence becomes too heavy to carry. For her, that moment arrived one evening when she sat again at the dinner table. The same chairs. The same plates. The same food. But no words, no eyes meeting. Only the sound of a fork against porcelain. She looked at him, hoping for even a small sign, maybe a smile, maybe a question, maybe anything that showed he still saw her. But he kept eating, eyes fixed on his plate as if she did not exist. The emptiness in that moment was louder than any fight. Her chest tightened. A thought rose inside her, sharp and clear. I cannot live like this anymore. It was not anger. It was not hate. It was something colder, something that told her she was disappearing inside this silence. Her laughter, her light, her dreams, they were fading day by day. And if she stayed, she feared she would vanish completely. The breaking point does not always come with shouting or tears. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a whisper that refuses to leave. That whisper grew stronger. Life is short. You deserve warmth. You deserve to be seen. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She simply sat still, letting the truth settle inside her. It was terrifying, yes, but also strangely freeing. For the first time in years, she knew she had a choice. Have you ever reached that moment? The point where staying feels more painful than leaving? It is like standing on the edge of a frozen lake, knowing the ice cannot hold you anymore. You either step off, or sink. She knew something had to change. And she also knew, the change had to begin with her. Small courage. Courage does not always look like shouting or leaving everything behind. Sometimes it looks very small, like a whisper, like a single step forward. For her, courage began with a notebook. One morning, she sat by the window, snow falling outside, and opened a blank page. She wrote down everything she had been holding inside, the loneliness, the silence, the memories, the questions, the breaking point. The words felt heavy, but also alive. They were proof that she still existed. Writing was not a solution. But it was a beginning. It was her way of saying, I will not stay silent anymore. The next day, she did something else, something even smaller, but powerful. At dinner, instead of waiting for him to speak, she asked him one simple question: how was your day? The words were quiet, almost fragile. But they broke the thick wall of silence, if only for a second. He looked up, surprised. His answer was short, but it was an answer. And for her, that was enough to feel a spark of hope. Small courage is like lighting a candle in the dark. The darkness does not disappear at once, but the light begins to grow. She realized she did not need to solve everything in one night. She only needed to take one step, then another. Step by step, courage could become stronger. Have you ever noticed? The hardest part is not climbing the mountain. It is taking the first step at the bottom. After that, your body remembers how to move. That night, as she closed her notebook and looked at the single candle on the table, she whispered to herself, this is not the end. This is the beginning. A warmer tomorrow. The morning sun was weak, but it felt brighter than before. She noticed it while making coffee, the smell filling the kitchen with a gentle comfort. Something inside her felt lighter, as if the heavy winter in her heart had cracked just a little. Small changes began to appear. She started walking more, not to escape the silence but to enjoy the world outside. She noticed the bakery on the corner, the children laughing on the way to school, the old man feeding pigeons near the square. Denmark was still cold, yes, but it was also alive. At dinner, she tried again. Another small question. Another gentle smile. Sometimes his answers were short. Sometimes they grew into small conversations. No, it was not perfect. But for the first time in a long time, the air at the table felt less frozen. Hope, she realized, is not a fire that burns all at once. It is a single spark, protected carefully, until it grows. Each little effort was like breathing life back into something that was almost gone. One evening, he surprised her. He brought home fresh bread from the bakery she liked. It was a small gesture, almost ordinary, but to her, it was everything. It meant he had noticed. It meant he still cared, even if only a little. Her heart warmed, not because everything was fixed, but because she saw a path. A path away from silence, toward connection. Have you ever felt that? When one small moment makes you believe tomorrow can be different. That is the power of hope. It does not erase the cold, but it makes you strong enough to walk through it. She smiled to herself. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. Final reflection. Love is not always fire. Sometimes it is frost. Sometimes it is silence. But silence does not have to be the end. Even in Denmark's coldest winter, a small spark can change everything. She learned that courage does not mean shouting or leaving. Sometimes it means picking up a pen, asking a simple question, or smiling when you feel like breaking. Small acts can slowly melt even the thickest ice, and maybe that is the secret. Love is not kept alive by grand promises. It is kept alive by noticing, by listening, by choosing each other again and again. She looked out the window at the quiet snow and whispered to herself, I am still here. I am still alive. And tomorrow will be warmer. Have you ever felt love turn cold in your life? Remember this, even a frozen heart can learn to beat again. That is the message of this story, and maybe it is also the message for you. Do not let silence steal your voice. Do not let cold steal your heart. There is always a warmer tomorrow, waiting for you to step toward it. In the coldest winters of Denmark, even love can freeze. But remember, silence is not the end. A single spark, a small act, can melt the frost. Hold on to hope. Tomorrow can always be warmer.